Hi and welcome to the video. In this video we're going to be looking at disabling, deleting and then recovering AD users and groups or AD objects, and the ways that we can do that in the event that we need to do such. To start with, we're going to cover the basics. We're going to open up our Active Directory users and computers, and from here we're going to browse down to one of our user profiles. So we're going to open up the top level ad.msptech.co.uk, and we're going to scroll down, filter down to our MSP Tech users, and we're going to use our London office, and we're going to choose Asher O'Ryan as our user in this example. Typically, when a user is either leaving the company or moving away, the AD object will need to be removed or disabled in the first instance and then deleted afterwards. There is also a potential that human error is made and the incorrect account is deleted, and all sorts of variety of things like that can happen. So to start with, what we're going to do is we're going to run through the process of disabling and deleting, and then we're going to recover the user as well. So using the Active Directory users computers, we're going to use Asher, as we've said. And what we're going to do is we're going to right click on the account and we're going to go to disable account. Active Directory will tell us that the account has been disabled, and what we'll find is, once that's happened, we'll have a smaller little down arrow next to the user's profile account, and that will indicate that the account is actually disabled. We can then actually test this by logging in with this user's account onto an endpoint, and what we'll see is that the account is no longer active. And as we'll see, this is what the end user would be presented with. So it's your account has been disabled. Please see your system administrator. We can go ahead and click OK to that. If we go back to our Active Directory, because the account is currently only disabled, we can actually just re-enable the account. So we can go ahead and right click. We can go ahead to enable account. Once again, this will now enable the object. We'll now notice that the small down arrow on the user account has now disappeared. And if we go back to our endpoint, we can actually log back in with this user's account. There we go. And that will now log this user into the machine. In this case, it's the first time the user logged in, so it's going to build the profile. Now if we go back to our Active Directory domain controller, obviously in the first instance we've just gone ahead and disabled the account. Most companies will have a policy in place, usually where the account will be disabled for a period of time and then the actual account will be deleted afterwards. And this is mostly just due to policies that people put in, or companies put in place, just to prevent the user returning very quickly and having to recreate the account from scratch. On the other side of this, there is also human error. So what we could actually find is that the account is accidentally deleted and it needs to be recovered. And we can emulate this very simply. We're just going to log off the endpoint from this user's account. And we can go ahead and delete this account. And if we right click, we can go to delete. And it's going to ask us, are you sure you wish to delete this user named, in this case, Asher? We're going to click yes to this, and what will happen is that will remove this from the OU that we're in, and it's actually now been deleted. If we go back to our endpoint device, we can then try and log in with this user's account again. And what we'll find is it'll actually provide us the password is incorrect. Try again. So it's not going to actually tell us the account doesn't exist anymore, rather it's just going to say that the password is incorrect. In the event that the user account is deleted, we then may need to restore that account. And there's a few ways we can do this. We can do this through the Active Directory ADSI edit, We can also use PowerShell, but typically if we're going to do it from a GUI driven option, I typically find the administrative center is actually the easiest way to do this. So if we click on Start and we go to our Windows Administrative Tools, we can use our Active Directory Administrative Center. And in this case, we're going to open this up. We're actually going to pin this to our taskbar for easy access. And what we'll see is we actually have the Active Directory Administrative Center overview, a few bits and pieces, including a quick password reset option as well as a global search. On the left hand side, what we'll find is there's a few extra options, but what we're looking at here is AD local. And if we go ahead and click on that, this will almost replicate what we have from our Active Directory. If we bring this side by side, what we'll see is on the left hand side here from our admsptech.co.uk, we've got our built-in computers, domain controllers, all our groups and organizational units, and we have that almost replicated here on the Administrative Center. The key extra that we have on the Administrative Center is we have our deleted objects container. And if we actually go into this deleted objects container, what this will do is this will show us all of the accounts that we've had, either created or deleted at some point. Now obviously in this environment we've gone through, I've deleted a few of the accounts and restored a few just for the purpose of populating this out, but we can see here that on a few occasions we've actually created and deleted accounts. Now in the example that we've actually done, we actually deleted the account of Asher, and we can see today's date is the 4th of the 8th. And if we look down, even if there are multiple objects of the same name, they'll all have individual security IDs or SIDs. And we can actually see that the account deleted today is listed here, 8th of the 4th. We can say Asher. Now what we can do is from this point, we can right click, we can click Restore or Restore To. We can also see the properties of the user account in case there's anything we need to check here. This is a limited view, but just gives us a quick overview. In this instance, we're going to go ahead and right click on the account that we wish to restore. Then we're going to go ahead and click Restore. Now what this will do is restore this exact AD account to the original location. So if we go back to our Active Directory, users and computers, and we go to our London location, if we do a refresh here, what we'll see is that Asher has now returned to this location. And if we go back to our endpoint, we can attempt to log in with this user account again. And there we go, we're now logged in. So there's no password reset or anything like that at this point in time. It's purely a delete the account, restore the account, and the user could continue as if nothing had happened previously. If we go back to our Active Directory now, if we also check on Asher and we open the account properties up for this user, what we'll also find is member of, and it's actually remembered the accounts that this was, or the groups that this user was a member of, so in this case domain users, which is the default, and they're also part of GG Engineering, or Global Group Engineering. As we mentioned previously, depending on the company's policy or procedures that are in place, it's not unusual that a user account or a AD object is disabled in the first instance and then deleted a period of time after. If this is the case, and this is the way the organization is going, it's typically a good idea to migrate the users away from their active location within Active Directory and place them into a separate or a dedicated organizational unit. As we covered in previous videos, we can create organizational units very easily, and we can even create one now just for these disabled accounts. So if we right click our ad.msptech.co.uk top level domain, we can go to new, we can go to organizational unit. In this case, we're going to call this MSP Tech disabled accounts. We can go ahead and click OK to that. That's going to place that in the list here on the left hand side. The advantages of having a disabled accounts OU is purely just from a management or an easier management point of view. So if we know that an account has been disabled or is due for deletion, it makes it easier to find. It also means that if we have to do reporting, we can report any disabled accounts via PowerShell very easily, just through a singular OU, rather than querying the entirety of AD, although there's times and usages for such, which we'll cover off in later videos when we cover more of the security side. In this example, we're going to use Asia again. We're going to go back to our example just here, and we're going to assume that this user is being disabled in the first instance and then removed after a period of time. Now typically, if we were to go ahead and disable the account, as Asia is based in the London organizational unit, if we were in a larger organization as we've created here, and we have a US site and a New Zealand site as well, if each of these geographical locations were to have a domain controller, what would happen is that when we disable this account in the first instance, so we right click and disable, it would actually take a few moments for this to replicate across, depending on the configuration we have. And we will look at the replication speed and times between different sites and different domain controllers in additional videos. But for now, what's to be mindful of is that if we do disable an account from a different location, there is a time delay before it will replicate across. That's also true of password replication as well. So although we've now disabled this account, most companies will follow a best practice of also resetting the individual's password, so that at the same time, if the account was to be re-enabled inadvertently, the user wouldn't necessarily be able to log on immediately, so there wouldn't be a breach of security. So we're going to go ahead now and just reset this password also. So we've disabled the account, we're now going to reset the password. We obviously have the automatic tick box for user must change password at next login, and we also have the option of unlocking the user accounts in the event the account has been logged out. Neither of these are particularly of importance in this particular instance. However, we usually leave these as default. We can go ahead and click OK. That'll reset the password. So now what we've done is we've disabled the account, we've reset the user's password. The final part of this would be to move this into the disabled accounts OU. And we can do that just by clicking and dragging that through. Or obviously if it's a much larger Active Directory, we can right click and move to. So we're going to be prompted when we try to move this that Active Directory is saying, are we sure we wish to do this? And we can go ahead and click yes. That's fine. And we can move to our disabled accounts here, and we can see that Asher is now currently disabled, and we also know we've just reset the password. Obviously this would then replicate across the other domain controllers that we have across multiple sites, and once that's happened, if Asher was to attempt to log in, even with the correct username and password, they won't be able to log in. And then in the event that the account was inadvertently re-enabled, the password would be a random password which no one would know, apart from the user that reset it. So even with the user re-enabled, the passwords would still be unknown. Following on from that also, other practices that companies usually follow will depend on the company in place, but a lot will also look to remove the membership of any and all groups that the user is belonging to. So in this case, the GG-engineering group would also, and as well as any others, would also look to be removed. That would also mean that in the event that the account was restored, or if the user was to return after a prolonged period of time, if the account was still disabled, should they have had access to something that they had previously, they would then need to re-request that, or that would then need to be manually re-added. Typically, the domain users group would always remain regardless, as that's the primary group that all users will belong to by default. However, as I say in this case, GG Engineering, they would typically go ahead and remove. We'll get the prompt, are you sure you wish to remove? Yes. And we can apply that change. So that means that if that user was a member of that group anywhere located on the network where special permissions were in place, departmentals, permissions, or perhaps logon rights to particular devices, even with the account re-enabled, that would then have to be re-requested. Again, we'll follow that part through with when we cover more of the security side and best practices for typically ISO or compliance reasons, but it's just something to be aware of at this point in time. Obviously, the immediate effect this would have is that if we were to then delete this user account, when it would be restored, those memberships won't be there. So again, this is something to bear in mind, and depending on the company's policies and procedures, it's something to plan out in advance in case of that event ever happening. Obviously at this point we've gone through the user account side of things. The other side of this is also Active Directory groups. Groups are handled in a very similar way to that of Active Directory users, as it is just an object to Active Directory. So if we go ahead and look at our MSP Tech groups, we can choose a permission group, and in this case we have our endpoints, and we already have our DLG endpoint administrators group. So in this particular example, if we were to look at the memberships here, we can see that this is the domain local group, which is applied to a resource, and the members of this is the GG-IT group. And in the previous videos, this was actually used to grant administrative access to our endpoint devices. So for the purpose of this example, we can see that this group here, we can go ahead and right click. Now there isn't an option to disable the group, however we do have the option to delete the group. And as much as the same as with the user account being deleted, we can go ahead and delete this account just here. We will be prompted, and we can go ahead and confirm this, and that will remove the group from Active Directory. Obviously at this point we can also use the Administrative Center that we were looking at previously, and if we refresh our deleted objects, what we'll be able to find is that our group is actually listed in here as well. And we can see that there's actually departments here, a few of the endpoints, and if we keep scrolling we will eventually find our DLG group. There we go, just there. And we can see that's been deleted today, 8th of the 4th, 4th of the 8th, sorry. US and UK dates are different, obviously, with month and day. So just be sure to double check that. But we can see the group is here, and what we can do is we can go ahead and restore this back immediately to where it was. So if we go ahead and right click and click on restore, that's going to restore that for us. We can bring this out of the way. And if we refresh our Active Directory, we'll see that endpoint device, endpoint group, endpoint administrators group has now been restored. Once again, if we open this up and look at the members, we'll see that it has remembered the group that it was a member that we're members of, and if it was a member of any other groups, it would also retain those as well. For now, we're going to go ahead and close this one off. And in the next instance, we're going to choose a different type of group. We're going to choose one of our departmental groups. We're going to go through the same process. In this case, we're going to choose GG-directors. We're going to go ahead and delete this group. We're going to be confirmed. Are we sure we wish to delete? Yes. And if we go back to our Administrative Center, if we perform a refresh here, we can scroll down to find this user account, this AD group, sorry. And there's GG directors. Now, one of the options that we haven't quite gone through just yet is the Restore To option. So if we right click on this AD group, we can actually select the Restore To. When we select this option, what this will do is this will ask us where we wish to restore this object to within Active Directory. Again, if we're following some of the company policies and procedures that companies have in place, it may be that we have the disabled accounts OU where we immediately restore them to, or move them, restore from that location into the actual live production environment, or there may be a staging area or a temporary holding place, depending on the policies in place. But it just means that we can move this to an alternative organizational unit if there was a reason to do so. Other reasons this may have an impact later on is if we have Active Directory synchronization to cloud services such as Microsoft 365 services, and we may not want the user account to be automatically synced up to our cloud environment, so we may have a non-syncing Active Directory organizational unit. Again, we'll cover that in later videos, but for the purpose of this, it just means we can restore to an alternative location should we need to. In this case, we're just going to select our original location, which was MSP Tech Groups. We know this was a department, and we're going to go ahead and click OK. That will then restore that group. We can minimize down the administrative center, and we can do a refresh on our departments here, and we can see the directors are back here. Once again, we can go into this AD group and we can double check the members, and we've got those listed here. And if it was a member of any other groups, it would also list these also. So this video has covered the high level of disabling, deleting, removing users from groups in the event of policies. We've created a disabled account organizational unit, and we've also recovered the users that we've deleted, not only to the original location, but also to alternative organizational units locations as well. Just going to refresh this to bring these all back into line. There we go. There is a time period for the Active Directory recycle bin, which is what we've been using here with the Active Directory Administrative Center. And if you recall, the reason this is enabled is because we enabled this from when we first built the Active Directory domain. If we go back to our overview at the top here, AD local, on the right hand side, what we've seen is that this is now grayed out, but this is the enable recycle bin option that we covered in one of the earlier videos, which was when we actually created our Active Directory domain. Obviously, if this part is not enabled, either when the domain is built or if an object is deleted before this is enabled, then we won't be able to restore this object in this way. And in that case, we'll have to use alternative methods, which we will cover in later videos.